Welcome to this week's episode of the Liberty Unveiled podcast, formerly the Yeshua Unveiled podcast. I am your host, Brad Hopp, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Pastor Sam Jones. Together, we are unveiling liberty one episode at a time. We'll be discussing the latest in trafficking news, insider stories from those being delivered, and studying the Founders Bible to learn how to return America to sanity and true freedom. Our sponsor for today's show is Yeshua Tea Company. Visit YeshuaTea.com or DeliveranceTea.com. Hi, and welcome to the Liberty Unveiled podcast. I'm your host, Brad Hopp, and as you can tell, my friend and co-host, Pastor Sam, wasn't able to be here this week, but he will be back next week and the week after that, so I'm excited to get him back over here so we can record some more episodes and stuff. They've been in a very busy season with the newborn and stuff, so we're looking forward to being able to record again here, though. We're going to continue right on where we left off last week in the Founders Bible. For those of you that are just joining us, every week we go through the Founders Bible, and we're going through the commentary that was written by David Barton and several other leading historians in America here. And we're examining how the source of freedom that the girls are experiencing is the same source of freedom that America experienced, and in America's case, how we've walked away from it. And as I was preparing for today's episode, I was thinking about one of the stories from one of the girls who started experiencing that freedom, but she thought that her brothel owner was in love with her. And so she chose to save up her money from selling us the bracelets and the coasters and whatever else, the tea and the coffee or whatever. And she chose to save up her money and buy a bus ticket back to her brothel owner because she thought he was in love with her. And she pretty quickly realized that he wasn't when he beat her up and put her in the hospital for a week. And you know, I think about America's foundation, and we had been the Pilgrims and our early founders had been so abused by the British monarchy and just starved and just treated horrifically. And we came over here and we gained our freedom, we gained our independence through the Declaration of Independence and through the Revolutionary War. And we started walking in that freedom. But then over time, as the generations passed, we forgot about our first love, and we've gone back to, maybe not to the British Crown, but we've gone back to our sin and our depravity, and we've started murdering our unborn. And we've started walking in the ways of Baal and Molech. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the Baal and Molech worship, Baal was a fertility god, and so sexual depravity, homosexuality, all these things were part of Baal worship. Molech worship was that the Canaanites and eventually the Israelites would sacrifice their children to Molech for prosperity and for blessings on the land and the rain and all this stuff. And what they would do is they would actually, the god Molech, they would build a statue to Molech, and he would have his hands stretched out, and he would have a metal bowl in between his hands. He would be holding onto this metal bowl, and they would build a fire up underneath that bowl, and they would sit there and beat the drums so that the fathers who were sacrificing their children couldn't hear their children screaming when they placed them in that hot pan and literally melted them. And it was an awful sacrificial ritual. And they did the beating of the drums so that the father couldn't hear the child screaming and have mercy on him or mercy on the child and rescue them. And it was an awful ritual. And we've returned to these, though, because we've allowed sexual promiscuity to run rampant in America, and it's part of the reason that America is today one of the biggest consumers of pornography and of the sex trade. And it's part of the reason that just depraved in America. We've gone back to aborting our children, all for prosperity, and convenience, and to be able to get ahead, and it's the reason that we're facing a time of judgment in America. And so as I was preparing for this, I'm thinking about the correlations between this young lady that went back to her brothel owner because she thought he was in love with her, just like America thought that these things were so much fun, and that our lovers would do us good and not harm, and yet we've destroyed our nation with our own hands. And she, in some ways, temporarily, she destroyed her life by going back to her brothel owner. She ended up getting put in the hospital. She ended up suffering because she decided to go back to him. Well, America's just suffering because we've decided to go back to these quote-unquote lovers of sexual immorality and abortion and all these things. And I know that that's harsh words for America, but really that's what we've done. And I'm praying that as we begin to see that these things don't pay, and as we begin to see that these things lead us down a path that we don't want to go down, I'm praying that we'll wake up and we'll realize what we've done and where we've ended up. And so last week we were talking about how the Civil War was a just punishment for America and for the sin of slavery. And this week we're going to get into something a little bit different. It's called Your Right to Life is the title of the section that we're looking at. And it really correlates to Exodus 22:2. And so let me just hop in here because it's talking about the Castle Doctrine. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the Castle Doctrine, this will really bring it to light, and it'll really shed some light on when you see people defending their homes and if you see people defending their businesses, they're really walking in the Castle Doctrine. And they have a right to do that biblically and under the foundation of American law, because American law is founded on the Bible. So let me just hop in here. Among the numerous civil laws God gave his people as he was establishing them as an independent nation was one concerning their own homes. He told them, if the thief is caught while breaking in and is struck so that he dies, though there will be no blood guiltiness on his account. Exodus 22:2. This verse authorizes homeowners to defend their dwelling, and if in the process of doing so they kill an intruder, they were not guilty in the eyes of God. There will be no guilt for shedding the blood of an intruder. This verse forms the basis of what is now known as the Castle Doctrine. It was explained by founding father James Wilson, the signer of the Declaration, or a signer of the Declaration and the Constitution, and an original justice on the U.S. Supreme Court, who declared, homicide is enjoined or required when it is necessary for the defense of one's person or house. Homicide is enjoined or required when it is necessary for the defense of one's person or house. Every man's house is deemed by the law to be his castle, and the law, while it invests him with the power, places on him the duty of the commanding officer of his house. Every man's house is his castle, and if anyone be robbed in it, it shall be esteemed his own default and negligence. In short, if you were robbed in your home, it was not the police's fault, but your own. For God made you the commander of your own castle. Hence the Castle Doctrine. Several other Bible verses affirm that what God authorized in Exodus 22. For example, Jesus noted in Luke 11:21 that when a strong man, fully armed, guards his own house, his possessions are undisturbed. And in the book of Nehemiah, when lawless brigands were on the loose, verse 41:11, God's people went about armed, and every man wore his sword girded at his side. Nehemiah 4:18. Because self-defense is a biblical right given to every individual, it is therefore an inalienable or God-given right. Constitution signer John Dickinson defined an inalienable right as one which God gave to you and which no inferior power has the right to take away. John Adams agreed, explaining that inalienable rights are rights antecedent to all earthly government, rights that cannot be repealed or restrained by human laws, rights derived from the great legislator of the universe. John Quincy Adams echoed this, avowing that man's inalienable rights are those given to him by his Creator, which can neither be taken away or can neither be taken from him by force nor transferred from him to anyone else. Hence, the rights derived are declared to be inalienable. In short, inalienable rights are God-given rights that belong to each and every individual, period. In other words, when you have an inalienable right of self-defense or whatever it may be, the civil government is in an inferior place to you, and they do not have the right to take away that inalienable right from you because they are in a lower or inferior position to you in that case. The Founding Fathers established American government with the primary purpose of securing to every individual the right to practice his or her inalienable rights. As the Declaration of Independence announced, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Three straightforward principles of American government are set forth in these words. There is a Creator, number one. Number two, He gives certain inalienable rights to man. And number three, government exists first and foremost to secure to every individual the exercise of his or her God-given rights. In addition to the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness listed in the Declaration of Independence, such as the right to own private property, the Bill of Rights lists other God-given rights such as freedom of religion, freedom of speech, justice in the court system, and many more, including the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, i.e. the biblical right of self-defense. Because this right was given by God, the Founding Fathers urged training for its possible use. For example, signer of the Declaration and framer of the Bill of Rights, Richard Henry Lee, encouraged, "It is essential that the whole body of the people always possess arms and be taught alike, especially when young, how to use them." Americans were instructed from their earliest years in their exercise of rights, including that found in the Second Amendment. Thomas Jefferson therefore advised his young nephew, whom he had raised as a son, "A strong body makes a mind strong." As to the species of exercise, I advised the gun. While this gives a moderate exercise to the body, it gives boldness, enterprise, and independence to the mind. Games played with the ball and others of that nature are too violent for the body and stamp no character on the mind. Let your gun, therefore, be the constant companion of your walks. John Quincy Adams agreed. When sent overseas by President James Madison on a diplomatic assignment, he left his son George Washington Adams to be cared for by his brother. Concerned about the education of his 9-year-old son, he wrote his brother, "One of the things which I wish to have them taught, and which no man can teach them better than you, is the use and management of firearms. This must undoubtedly be done with great caution, but it is customary among us, particularly when children are under the direction of ladies, to withhold it too much and too long from boys. The accidents which happen among children arose more frequently from their ignorance than from their misuse of weapons, which they know to be dangerous. I beg you occasionally from this time to take George out with you in your shooting excursions. Teach him gradually the use of the musket, its construction, and the necessity of prudence in handling it. Let him also learn the use of pistols, and exercise him at firing at a mark. Adams is correct. Accidents with youth and guns occur primarily because youth are unfamiliar with guns and how to handle them safely. Strikingly, guns were numerous in the founding era, and every citizen usually owned several. But historical records affirm that gun accidents during that period were almost non-existent. The Second Amendment's right to keep and bear arms is the constitutional embodiment of the biblical right of self-defense found in Exodus 22 and other passages. Another of the many American rights rooted in biblical teachings. The next section here is from Exodus 24, or covers Exodus 24, a pledge of adherence. After God delivered his people from bondage in Egypt and set them on their way to becoming an independent nation, he stopped them in the wilderness and delivered them to the structure and civil laws that would both define and govern the new nation. Moses called the people together and explained these requirements. When the people heard and understood, they pledged their adherence or allegiance, declaring, "All the words which the Lord has spoken, we will do." Exodus 24:3. Moses later built an altar to the Lord and again told the people what God expected of them in the new nation. The people again pledged their adherence or allegiance. In fact, on numerous occasions, the people pledged themselves and their fidelity to the nation and its laws as established by the Lord. Exodus 19, verse 3 through 8, Deuteronomy 27, 6 through 26, 1 Chronicles 16, 15 to 36, and Psalm 106, 34 to 48. Americans also pledge adherence, fidelity, and allegiance to our country as established by God. Our original Pledge of Allegiance was penned in 1892 by the Reverend Francis Bellamy and was used by educators in Chicago during the 400th anniversary celebration of Columbus landing in the New World. Then, in 1923 and 1924, the phrase, "the flag of the United States of America," was added to replace Bellamy's original "My Flag," thus causing the pledge to become, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." In 1942, the pledge was officially added to the U.S. flag code. Today, we are accustomed to hearing "under God" in the pledge, but that phrase was not added until 1954. It came as a result of a sermon preached by Reverend George Docherty of Scotland, who at that time was pastoring 2 blocks from the White House at the New York Avenue Presbyterian Church. On February 7th, 1954, with President Dwight Eisenhower sitting on the front row and several congressmen and senators also in attendance, Docherty started that morning's sermon by reviewing the central role that God had played in American history. He affirmed that America had taken the precepts of the Bible and incorporated them into American life and culture, acknowledging God as being essential to our core American identity. The spiritual concepts of the early American Puritans were derived from the Bible, from the Old Testament no less than from the New. Sinai as well as Calvary was their mount of vision. The moral law of God was given to Moses in tables of stone, thus symbolizing their eternal and unchangeable character, was applicable to all men. They found in the teaching of Jesus of Nazareth a way of life that was a fulfillment in history of all that the prophets foretold and the law prescribed. Early American history was caught up with a sense of destiny that was broader and deeper than simply personal ambitions and the desire to be a success. The Puritans triumphed because they made success the byproduct rather than the end of their lives. Lincoln in his day saw this clearly. Under God, the nation would know a new birth of freedom, and by implication, it could only be under God that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Doherty, that was from Reverend Doherty. Doherty then related a conversation he had with his son. "What did you get at school today, Garth?" I inquired. "Well, as usual, we began the day by standing up and with our right hand across our breast, recited the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And then, to an American father, the description of such a beginning of the day at school was so commonplace as not to require any further elucidation. But so great was my ignorance of the American scene that I did not know what precisely were the words of the pledge. With the solemnity that only a child can muster, Garth answered my question. "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." It so happened that at that moment I was in the midst of preparation for a Lincoln Day sermon and had been thinking rather seriously about the centrality of the providence of God in the life of Mr. Lincoln, and his recurrent use of the phrase "under God," not only in his Gettysburg Address, but so often implied, if not explicit, in his other addresses. It seemed immediately odd to me in that mood that the phrase "under God" had not been included in the pledge of allegiance to the flag. From the very beginning, certain basic principles had been laid down not merely by the founding fathers who had begun their first proclamation with the words, "In the name of God, amen," but by the framers of the Declaration of Independence. Behind this declaration was the basic belief that men were created equal. There can be no creation without a creator. But dependence upon God in this most important pledge, which even the children in day school began the day, had apparently been omitted. Without this phrase, "under God," the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag might have been recited with similar sincerity by Muscovite Russian children at the beginning of their day. The USSR professes to believe in liberty and claims to be just, to have its own code of laws, and to recognize justice for every individual. Again, Russia calls itself a democratic country. One fundamental concept alone differentiates the one view of the state from the other, and this is a spiritual rather than a political concept. As soon as the phrase "under God" is included in the pledge, it separates it fundamentally from the communist view of the nation and its interpretation of liberty and freedom. Lincoln in his day was perennially aware of this view of life. When he used the phrase "under God," he was reminding the people of the United States of the only basis upon which they might find their true freedom. And you wonder why people are trying so hard to get rid of "under God" out of our Pledge of Allegiance. Following the sermon, President Eisenhower went to Pastor Doherty and told him, I think you've got something." The next day, a bill was introduced under a bill was introduced to add under God to the pledge, and members of Congress pointed to his sermon as the reason and inspiration for the law. 4 months later, Eisenhower signed the bill into law. In a sermon that had recounted both the biblical principles incorporated into America and the great American leaders who acknowledged God and his principles, Pastor Doherty recommended the addition of the phrase "under God" to our national pledge. As a result, each and every day across America, millions declared their pledge of adherence, fidelity, and allegiance to a nation that was founded under God and upon his principles. Okay, and the next section is a little blurb about James Madison. Graduating from Princeton just before the Revolution, James Madison became a state leader and helped draft the 1776 Virginia Constitution. During the Revolution, he served in the state legislature and the Continental Congress. After the Revolution, he returned to the state legislature and then was sent as a delegate to the Constitutional Convention, where he played an active role, becoming one of the master builders of the Constitution. After signing the Constitution, he, along with Alexander Hamilton and John Jay, co-authored the Federalist Papers, which were instrumental in securing ratification of the Constitution. He served in the first Federal Congress, where he helped frame the Bill of Rights, was Secretary of State under President Thomas Jefferson, and then became the fourth President of the United States, retiring after 2 terms to live out his days at his estate, Montpelier. Okay. This next section deals with Exodus 18:21, America's political form of government. Across the centuries, there have been many different forms of government that have produced widely varying results, some good, some bad. The Bible mentions many of these forms and gives a definite preference to a specific one. But before examining that one, consider the 7 general categories that encompass most forms of government. Totalitarianism, number 1. A highly centralized government that does not tolerate individualism or differences of opinion. Both communistic and socialistic governments represent totalitarianism. But totalitarianism governments can also be led by a dictator, czar, sultan, premier, etc., or in the Bible by emperors, Luke 2:1, Caesars, Mark 12:17, or pharaohs, Exodus 1-14. Number 2, monarchy. A government headed by a king, queen, or emirate. It is often hereditary, passed on from one family member to another, such as the Stuarts or Tudors of England. There are also limited or constitutional monarchies where a higher law is above the monarch, such as the Magna Carta with English kings. Israel's kings were intended to be limited monarchs, for before any king took the throne, he was to personally write out a copy of the laws that God had given to govern Israel, to ensure that the king knew and would comply with the higher law. Deuteronomy 17:18-20. And before the people agreed to be under the king and the people would first make a joint covenant with God. 2 Samuel 5:3 and 2 Kings 11:17. But most of Israel's kings ignored these commands, and so their governments became unlimited monarchies, which is also a form of totalitarianism. Number 3, republic and constitutional republic. A government in which the sovereign power is exercised by representatives elected by the people. A weak form of a republic is represented by parliamentary systems, as well as representative democracies, in which representatives elected by the people are the sovereign power and rule until the people select new representatives. A constitutional republic is the highest form of republican government and is one in which the representatives elected by the people are not sovereign, but are instead subject to a higher sovereign law. a written constitution. This form of an elective representative constitutional republic is described in Exodus 18:21 and Deuteronomy 1:15-16 and 16 verse 18 is what founding father John Adams described as a government of laws, not of men. And that is the form that we have. Oligarchy, a government in which power resides in the hands of a small elite group. This includes feudal tribal government, aristocracy, plutocracy. In the Bible, the Sanhedrin, Luke 22:66, was a ruling oligarchy. And I want to come back to the constitutional republic. Our nation is and is supposed to be a constitutional republic. Our leaders and our representatives are to be subject to the Constitution. The Constitution is over them. They and the laws the Constitution and the laws contained within the Constitution are to govern over the judiciary, the executive branch, and the legislative branch. They are supposed to be subject to the Constitution, not vice versa. Okay, number 5, anarchy or revolutionary. A government without laws, where the supreme power is with each individual who does what he wishes or has the power to do. That is an anarchy or revolutionary. Founding father John Quincy Adams described this as having no other law than that of the tiger or the shark. This would include governments such as those in France during the time of the American founding, when the guillotine became the same symbol of government. An anarchic or revolutionary government is described in the Bible as that in which every man did what was right in his own eyes. Deuteronomy 12:8, Judges 17:6, and Judges 21:25. Democracy, a government in which the sovereign power lies with the people, who exercise the lawmaking power through direct majority votes rather than through any elected representatives. Because this government is based on the popular sentiments of the people at any given point in time, it is frequently an unstable and fluctuating government. A democracy is seen in what transpired around Jesus during his final week on earth. As he entered into Jerusalem, the people ushered him in with great enthusiasm, treating him as a national hero. Matthew 21:9. But the very next week, the same people all said, "Crucify him." Matthew 27:21. Founding father John Adams used the term mob rule, and Benjamin Rush, mobocracy, terms that capture well the problems of a democracy. It is an unpredictable government where passions and selfishness often prevail over reason and deliberation. Our form of government is to be a constitutional republic, not a democracy. So whenever you hear somebody say we're a democracy, no, we are not. We are actually a constitutional republic. Theocracy, a government run by immediate representatives of God claiming to act directly on his commands. In the Bible, both Eli and Samuel ruled in this manner before the nation changed to a monarchy. Such governments have a complete blending of both civil and religious laws without any separation of church and state, and with no input from the people. Many Islamic nations are theocracies, often ruled by an ayatollah or imam, as throughout the Middle East and Asia. While there can be blended forms of government, such as monarchs within a parliamentary system, these 7 general forms encompass most human governments. So where does America fit within these various categories? Many people today believe that we are a democracy, and our political leaders often tell us we are. But we definitely are not. Our founders had an opportunity to establish a democracy in America and deliberately chose not to. The form of government they entrusted to us was a constitutional republic. In fact, Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution requires that the United States shall guarantee to every nation in this union a republican form of government. The founders made clear that we were not and were never to become a democracy. Democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. James Madison. Remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. John Adams. A democracy is a volcano which conceals the fiery materials of its own destruction. These will produce an eruption and carry desolation in their way. Fisher Ames, framer of the Bill of Rights. Not only was a democracy a very bad form of government, but as John Adams explained, it often led downward to even worse forms of government. Democracy will soon degenerate into an anarchy, such an anarchy that every man will do what is right in his own eyes, and no man's life or property or reputation or liberty will be secure. And every one of these will soon mold itself into a system of subordination of all the moral virtues and intellectual abilities, all the powers of wealth, beauty, wit, and science, to the wanton pleasures, the capricious will, and the execrable, abominable cruelty of one or a very few. America framed its government to elect representatives according to the directive of Exodus 18:21. Therefore, you shall select out of all the people able men who fear God, men of truth, those who hate dishonest gain, and you shall place these over them as leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. And I want to address something here real quick because my pastor for years has preached on Exodus 18:21, and I have heard so many people, I can't even begin to count. Well, we can't find those kind of people today. Those people just don't exist. What do you want? Somebody that follows all 10 of the commandments and never is holier than thou? I've heard every stupid excuse you could possibly hear. But I want you to listen to this. Furthermore, you shall select out of all the people able men who fear God. Not hard. You have to be capable and you have to fear God. That's not difficult. Men of truth. Gee, you can't be a liar. Those who hate dishonest gain. Gee, you can't take a bribe. And you shall place these. There's only 4 qualifications here. Able men. Men that know how to balance a budget. Know how to follow the law as prescribed in the Constitution. Know how to look at and read. Gee, that's a hard one. Actually read the Constitution and understand it. And then go, okay, does this law follow the Constitution? If it does, great, we'll enact it. If it doesn't, boom, throw it out. Not difficult. Able men who fear God. And they go, okay, God, I want what you want. That's not difficult. Men of truth. If we would just do this one, we wouldn't have the current political system we have going on in America today. And those who hate dishonest gain. If we had this one going, we wouldn't have all the lobbies or the lobbyists. I want to rip my hair out. People, Exodus 18:21 is not difficult to do. It's not hard. If we would just do this, if we would look out and we would see, you know what? Joe is a man, I've watched him for years. No, I'm not talking about Biden, but Joe or Tom or Harry or whatever is a man that I know. He knows how to balance a budget. He knows how to keep his family finances in order. He's a good, astute businessman. He is a man of integrity. I've not heard him tell a lie. And the people that he works with have never heard him tell a lie. He's a man of integrity. He's a man of he doesn't like bribes. And I know he's a believer. He's a man that fears God. This is not difficult. The problem is we have so many people that when we find somebody like this, they absolutely, positively, 180,000% run them into the ground and treat them like absolute crap. And so they don't want to go into political office. And thus, the reason we have the current political system, the current pond, the current swamp that we currently have. We thus elect our own leaders at the local, county, state, and federal levels, and we should elect God-fearing, honest leaders at every level. Significantly, this verse was directly cited by numerous founding fathers and had also been the subject of many influential sermons in the founding era. Exodus 18:21 establishes a constitutional republic. With ancient Israel, God gave them this verse to choose their leaders only after he had first given them a framework of laws to govern their nation. So too in America, our Constitution, based on God's higher law, where what the founders titled Laws of Nature and of Nature's God, which they also described as the moral law, is the framework to govern our nation. It is a law higher than any elected official, and a law to which every citizen and government representative must conform. And it's not difficult. This higher law identified specific inalienable rights that God gave to every individual, which thus provided equality and equal protection for every person in the practice of his God-given rights. In fact, our governing documents explicitly attest that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That is, our government exists first and foremost to secure every individual his God-given inalienable rights, including those of life, liberty, property, self-defense, religious worship, security of home, justice in legal proceedings, etc. These rights are not subject to a majority vote or any other vote, ever. The officials we elect do not hold sovereign power, but rule only beneath this higher sovereign law. Of the nearly 200 nations in the world, America is the most stable, operating well over 2 centuries under the same governing documents. But it is also the only nation uniquely and correctly identified by the World Factbook, a popular and heavily referenced annual publication of the Central Intelligence Agency, as a constitution-based federal republic. And this has been our form of government since given to us by our founding fathers in 1789. The founders openly affirmed that the Bible had produced our unique constitutional republic. The Bible is the most Republican book in the world, John Adams. I have always considered Christianity as the strong ground of republicanism. Benjamin Rush, the signer of the Declaration. Our citizens should early understand that the genuine source of correct Republican principles is the Bible. Noah Webster. A constitutional republic is the highest form of government devised by man, but it also requires the greatest amount of human care and maintenance. Founding Father Noah Webster called the schoolmaster to America for his substantial influence on American education, therefore instructed the rising generation. When you become entitled to exercise the right of voting for public officers, let it be impressed on your mind that God commands you to choose for rulers just men who will rule in the fear of God. Exodus 18:21. The preservation of the Republican government depends on the faithful discharge of this duty. If the citizens neglect their duty and place unprincipled men in office, the government will soon be corrupted. Laws will be made not for the public good so much as for selfish and local purposes. Corrupt or incompetent men will be appointed to execute the laws. The public revenues will be squandered on unworthy men, and the rights of the citizens will be violated or disregarded. If a Republican government fails to secure a national prosperity and happiness, it must be because the citizens neglect the divine commands and elect bad men to make and administer the laws. We are so doing that today. We are in trillions of dollars of debt because of that very thing right there. And that was Noah Webster. In another text, Noah Webster similarly admonished, in selecting men for office, let principle be your guide. It is alleged by men of loose principles or defective views of the subject that religion and morality are not necessary or important qualifications. I want to read that again. It is alleged by men of loose principles or defective views of the subject that religion and morality are not necessary or important qualifications for political stations. But the scriptures teach a different doctrine. They direct that rulers should be men who rule in the fear of God, able men such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness. Exodus 18:21. It is to the neglect of this rule of conduct in our citizens that we must ascribe the multiplied frauds, breaches of trust, peculations, white-collar larceny, and embezzlements of public property, which astonish even ourselves, which tarnish the character of our country, which disgrace a Republican government. America's Republican form of government is derived from the Bible, but it can only be preserved so long as citizens know and heed the Bible directives for choosing the right type of leaders to be placed at the helm of our constitutional republic at all levels, local, county, state, and federal. I'm hoping we'll get to this next section next week. It's called the 10 Commandments, the Moral Law for Nations, and I am very excited to get to this one because it talks about the 4 types of law: the ceremonial law, the moral law, the judicial law, and the social compact law. Those are the 4 types of law that are in play, and it may surprise you because so many people want to say that the law has been done away with, that the Old Testament's been done away with, the 10 Commandments have been done away with. There's such a movement in America today amongst religious leaders, ungodly religious leaders, but religious leaders in the church They say the old covenant doesn't, or the Old Testament doesn't apply to us today. The Ten Commandments have been done away with. They do not have a basic understanding of next week's lesson. That there are 4 types of law. That there's the ceremonial, the moral, the judicial, and the social compact law. One of those 4 has been done away with, but not all 4 of them. And so I'm hoping to get to this next week, and in fact, I'm sure we will, because I'm really excited to get to this. Folks, we are in a very interesting time in American history. We are in a time of God's judgment because of the 60 plus million unborn in America. This is not the time to withdraw from the fight. This is not the time to back up. This is not the time to surrender ground. This is not the time to back down. If anything, this would be an easy time for us to say, you know what, we don't know what's going to happen, so we're just not going to do anything, and we're not going to continue the fight for girls that are trafficked. We're just going to hole up in a hole in the ground and care about our 4 no more. But we can't do that. That's not what God has called us to do. God has called us to stand and fight for those that are helpless. God has called us to stand and fight for those that are abused and forgotten by society. God has called us to stand and to defend the powerless and the weak. And that's what we will do. We will continue to fight for the girls. We will continue to fight for their deliverance. We will continue to fight to provide for them. And so I hope you'll join us in this. I hope you'll take the time to visit teshuatea.com, TESHUAHTEA.com, or deliverancetea.com, and go on there and buy some of the products. Support the girls support their work. You know, this does directly impact them. It directly impacts them. You know, it helps them save up money so that they can live on their own when they leave our rescue facility. It helps them to be able to have have the money saved up so they have a home, or are able to rent an apartment rather. You know, when they leave our rescue facility, this is very direct source help, because we don't negotiate with the girls. When they say this is what I want for the product, that's what we pay them. And we bring it over here and we resell it, and then half our profits are going back to the rescue facility to care for the girls. So it's really a double whammy. You know, yes, I need to be able to provide for my family. Yes, I have to be able to provide for my family so that I don't have to be out on the road delivering fire trucks. It's nearly impossible to do both. We're managing for now, but we can't run as hard and fast as we need to run when I'm not able to provide for my family from Teshua, and not have to be out on the road. I mean, when I'm running out on the road, I'm running 12 to 14 hour days, and then when I get to the hotel, you know, I'm having to sleep so I can get up and do the same thing over the next day. And so, you know, I really encourage you to stop by, check out the products, check out the tea, check out the coffee. You know, we roast the coffee fresh on demand. The tea is absolutely fantastic tea. It is world-class tea. And I don't ever want to offer or have the girls offer anything that's not top quality. I want us to be able to bring you the best products that we can possibly bring you. So, you know, so if you stop by the website and you purchase some of the products, understand that it does several things. Yes, it helps me to be at home so that I can, you know, pay for advertising so that I can provide for my family and be able to you know, just do what we need to do. It's, you know, as far as is somehow, some way, shape, or form, we have to have the money to live on. I don't have to drive around a Rolls Royce or anything. That's not my heart. My heart is to see Andrew, to see Judd's people be blessed, Andrew's people be blessed, Andrew be blessed. To see them be able to run, be able to see Judd's people in Nigeria be provided for, and be able to offer them radios and food, and be able to do everything we can to establish the work with them, to establish the work with the girls in Asia and other groups around the world as we expand, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, we want to, and we need to be able to take some of the load off of Andrew having to raise money to pay for $22,000 or better a month to care for 41 girls. That's a lot of money, and being able to sell the product allows us to take some of the load off. When you donate, that takes some of the load off, and so I really want us to band together and to be able to do this. So I really encourage you to like and subscribe and share the videos, please. It really does help us to get the word out. Facebook, it's really stupid. We the people that actually host the podcast for us, Michael and Teresa, they kind of handle the back end side of stuff for the Liberty Unveiled podcast, and they were setting up some Facebook ads, and Facebook denied our ad requests because they felt we were too controversial. So I guess saving girls out of sex trafficking is too controversial. It just boggles my mind. So please, there's a lot of forces that are against what we're doing, and I'm not going to back up, and I'm not going to stand down. We're going to continue to go, but I need your help. I need you to help us get the word out. I need you to share the podcast. I need you to help share the YouTube video. All of that stuff helps us because there are groups that don't want to see us get the word out. So anyway, I appreciate it. I love you all. Thank you for taking the time to stop by and watch the podcast or listen to the podcast, whichever platform you're on. Thank you for taking the time to stop by the website, teshuatea.com or deliverancetea.com, and picking up some of the products. We're moving into the holiday season. I will bring this up real quick before I let you go here, or before we end the show. If you go to teshuatea.com and go under the donate tab, or deliverancetea.com and go under the donate tab, the first one is going to be the PayPal deal, which we talked about earlier, how when you do the PayPal donation, if you when you go on to PayPal's site, if you send it like you're sending to friend and family, then 100% of that donation goes direct to the rescue facility. If you send it like you're sending it to a business, which you have the choice, you have the option there. If you send it like you're sending it to a business, then PayPal takes their cut. And we don't want, I like PayPal or whatever, but they take their cut when you guys purchase products and you use PayPal to pay for it. That's fine. Whatever, they take their cut. Not a big deal. But when you're making a donation, we want 100% of that to go to the rescue facility. So please make sure that you're sending that via where you're sending it to a friend or family. Secondarily, there's an option down below that where you can sign up for our Teshua app. And that app, it is a we call it give back, get back. It's kind of the principle of it. So when you sign up for the app does cost $25. $10 of that automatically goes back to Teshua Tea Company or Teshua House. $10 of that goes to onto the app for you to use once you hit $25 in rebates, so you're $10 closer to that 25. So all you need to do is get $15 more in rebates, and then you can start using that cashback rebate to buy more gift cards, or so on and so forth. And then $5 of it is the actual cost of the app. So if you go on and sign up for the app, you can use the app at Amazon, Best Buy, Walmart, Sam's Club, eBay, I think Cracker Barrel maybe, Outback, Red Lobster. There's like 300 stores. Abercrombie and Fitch, Nike, and I don't support all these stores, and I know that a lot of our listeners don't either, but there's a lot of stores that you do support and you do go to or whatever. So why not get a percentage back? When you go to these stores, what you do is you open the app before you get to the register. You open the app, and then when the clerk gives you your total, you type that in. So let's say the total is $375. You got 4 pair of Nike or whatever. So $375 at Nike store. I think Nike's like 10% back. So you type in that $375. You buy the electronic gift card with the app. You get $37.50 back into the app. So now you're at $47.50 in the app, one-time use. You bought your shoes, and now you have $47 to use to either buy another gift card, or you can donate a portion of that. And so that rebate can be donated either 10% up to 100%. Anywhere from 10% to 100% can be donated to Teshua Tea Company, or Teshua House, rather. And you can choose the amount you want to donate, and then right there in the app is Teshua, and you'll be able to just donate it straight to Teshua, and that goes to the rescue mission. And so you're going to be shopping for Christmas gifts, you're going to be whatever, you're going to be going to Walmart and buying your Thanksgiving dinner and stuff. You can use the app, and that gives money back on an ongoing basis to Teshua Tea Company, or Teshua House rather. So anyway, I appreciate you guys. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to the show, and God bless and have a great day. Bye-bye. You've been listening to the Liberty Unveiled podcast, setting captives free one episode at a time. The Liberty Unveiled podcast is a part of the Unresolved Podcast Network and has been brought to you by Teshua Tea Company, TESHUAHTEA.com or DeliveranceTea.com.